A shocking eviction moratorium is issued, but does it help you? Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Afternoons LA. Hope you're great and safe. This is our 2-hour programming block. Yes, it starts every day with the check at 3:30, then goes to Hazard Pay, then rent assist, then FPUC, and finally rent assistance, which covers everything from rent eviction to mortgage forbearance, loan forbearance, and also the rent aid, which is part of a rent grant, which is part of the second stimulus package. Great news today. But it's not so great because it doesn't necessarily apply to a lot of people. There's a new eviction moratorium issued on a federal level minutes ago. Let me get right to it. President Donald Trump earlier this month said he did not want to evict people. He will solve the problem largely, hopefully, completely. That was then. The next day, he issued an eviction moratorium, but it's not an eviction moratorium. This channel was the first to report it's literally nothing. It says that in the case of not being able to pay your rent, call up the sleepy doctor and talk to the sleepy doctor about it. Now, the head of HUD. Now, why would we call up someone to talk about an eviction when we want an eviction moratorium? It also says to call up, Steve Mnuchin and chat about it. Steve, I don't need to chat about my eviction problem. I need to stop it. That was then. Well, today, the Department of HUD, which is under that sleepy doctor, said it will issue a ban on evictions. That's the great news. The not so great news is that it's narrowly tailored in the rest of the sentence. HUD says it will extend a ban on evictions in single-family houses with mortgages issued by Federal Housing Administrator. What does this mean? So it means if you live in a Federal Housing Administration home, and it's a single-family home, and you're a renter, and the mortgage is carried by Federal Housing Administration, HUD will now protect you and not allow you to be evicted. That's about as nearly tailored as you could be. But at least it's a movement. It's good. This protection would be far narrower than the now expired eviction moratorium in the CARES Act. Yes, we know that. The original CARES Act's eviction moratorium also covered Fannie Mae and Freddie Mae homes, which is about a third of the country's retail units. This one doesn't cover a third of the retail units. So what is the reaction? Emily Benford, an eviction expert at Wake Forest, says that HUD's new moratorium only applies to a slight fraction of units covered under the CARES Act, the first stimulus package, and does nothing to protect the overwhelming majority of renters in the United States from eviction and its devastating consequences. Will Fisher, Senior Director of Housing Policy and Research at the Center at Budget and Policy Priority, commented on what he thinks about what's going on with evictions. It would bring little help to renters. If we do not see an extension of moratoriums and rental assistance is going to be a real risk, we're going to see a sharp rise in evictions. It's just, these people that give these quotes, that's the most Captain Obvious quote. There's going to be a lot of evictions. Oh, thank you. It's like, hello. I think a 2-year-old could have given that quote. No offense to you, Mr. Fisher. But, oh, my God. Now there's another report out from a National Housing Law Project. Eric Dunn, who's director of litigation there, says landlords are just waiting to evict people and that they haven't started yet. Up to 40 million Americans may lose their homes currently, 4 times that amount seen in the Great Recession. 1 in 5 renters are behind in their rent, and some states it's actually worse. Now, I'm going to tell you, the economic data is far worse. A lot of these news reporters cite data that is, 4 weeks old. I know the data because I've been reporting on it for 4 weeks. It's that old shirt. You're like, I wore that 4 weeks ago. I know how old it is now. The data is like 3/4 of renters in some states face evictions. Other states, you know, 65% of African Americans and Latinos across the country are facing eviction. The numbers of renters that are Latinos and African Americans that are facing eviction is astronomical. It is astronomical. Now, the number of people who can't make rent, who made less than 40,000 dollars last year, is through the roof. These are enormous numbers. We're not talking about 5%, 10%. We're talking about 60, 70, 75%, 80%. We're talking about enormous percentages. You can't have this. You literally can't have the entire real estate industry implode. If you're not familiar with how the American economy works, it doesn't really revolve around the postman. It doesn't revolve much around, Kentucky Fried Chicken. It revolves around a series of economic parameters. One of them is the real estate industry. You can't have the real estate industry collapse, because once you do, it just smashes everything else. A collapse of the real estate market would collapse the banking industry, and a collapse of the banking industry would collapse the stock market, which would collapse, technology. Things just get very quick and very bad overnight. How important is this? And what is Nancy and Steve and Chuck and all those wonderful people doing for you? Nothing. No one has done a standalone bill, which I have called for weeks. A standalone eviction moratorium, even by the president, by executive order. I've called for that as well. As the sirens are coming to get me. I've called for these incredible things, but no one is giving them. The problem with eviction moratoriums is no one is getting them done. And they're so simplistic. This channel has been reporting for over 3 weeks that an eviction moratorium can be done all of one sentence, let alone one page. And earlier this week, the Democrats were under fire because Carolyn Maloney, the Democrat out of New York, House representative, wrote a one-page bill for the postman. That bill will be the topic of discussion by the Democrats this Sunday, as Nancy Pelosi has ordered all House members back in session to vote on Caroline's one-page bill. Well, why can't they do a one-page bill for eviction moratorium? Are there no New York renters about to face eviction at all? Untrue. Is eviction not a priority for Caroline in her own state of New York or her own area of New York? Now, I understand that the Democrats have an eviction moratorium in their HEROES Act, but there's nothing preventing them from doing a standalone bill for just eviction moratorium. In fact, as we sit here today, eviction moratoriums are so needed in states like New York, or states that don't have eviction moratoriums in place, that people wonder, why haven't they been instituted? Now, I certainly don't know the eviction moratorium positions for a state perspective in the city or state of New York, but in many states, vast majority of U.S. states currently don't have eviction moratoriums. They expired in July. So landlords are now rushing to court in record number. The number of new cases for evictions have never been seen since the Great Depression. Upwards of 40 to 50 million current eviction cases across the country. Now, this is not just for renters. The issue for foreclosures is absolutely rampant. And the reason why I talked about earlier how you can't have the real estate market shut down or collapse is because it's all trickle up. It starts with a renter who can't pay rent. Then a landlord evicts the tenant. Then the landlord loses their apartment building because they don't have the money to pay the bills. The bank forecloses on and the bank takes the apartment building. Then the bank has the apartment building and doesn't have a mortgage or interest payment because the landlord wasn't paying the mortgage, couldn't afford it. Then the bank has to sell the property and suddenly banks go under. That's how banks have collapsed before, is too many mortgages go into default, too many foreclosures. In fact, many of the major bank failures of the 21st century and the 20th century were because of collapses of the real estate market. So as we sit here today, does Nancy want the real estate market to collapse? Does Chuck want the real estate market to collapse? They don't say they do, but in other regards, this is what Chuck Schumer is doing on a daily basis. He's talking about the postman, talking about a letter he wrote about the postman, talking about the hearing about the postman, talking about what the postman, how he was elected, talking about how Steve Mnuchin is behind the alleged corruption about the postman, talking about how much the postman was a donor. Postman, postman, postman. No talk about evictions. No talk about foreclosures. So it causes you to wonder, where are these people's priorities? Do they not see people are being evicted? Do they not see people have been evicted? Do they not see people losing their homes? Do they not see people about to lose their homes? And as they sit here talking about a mailman, the obvious question or remark is the following: who cares about the mail when you've lost your home? People's priority about mail when they don't have a home is about as much a priority as people not having a stimulus check, or Nancy talking about the postman, when they don't have a stimulus check to eat food. The priorities of the Democrats in recent days have been deeply troubling. They haven't called out the president's executive order, which is a sham, which is absolutely horrific. The president's executive order was an absolute lapse of judgment, once again, by this president, that seemed to create an eviction moratorium. It didn't. So rather than the Democrats come out in full force and say, this is a sham, this is a failure of the presidency, this is this and this is that, they don't even talk about it. It's as though we're supposed to sit back and think we have an eviction moratorium in place. We don't. So neither Republicans nor Democrats said anything about it. I'm the only one telling you, by the way, don't tell anyone, you don't have an eviction moratorium. No one's telling people this. So they're sitting back, they're not doing an eviction moratorium for you. The president has made a mess of it. And what are they doing? They're talking about the postman. But the good news is that some people think that the chatter about the postman is just a subterfuge, that's just a Sunday, and that after that we're going to get to the heart and bones. We will see. We will see. Coming up this evening is Evenings at LA, our 1-hour programming block. Thank you for bringing us to 200,000 subscribers. A lot of fun. A great family here. Let's keep it going. As always, like and subscribe to this channel. As I'm about to sneeze. The postman is allergic. I'm allergic to the postman stuff. It's just like enough with the postman. And coming up next is Evenings at LA. As always, stay of LA for more.